There's a lot of argument right now about when the right time to do it is. Everyone's not sure exactly what's too early because you want to give your doctor enough time to get this year's formula in stock, and you want to make sure that shot will last you the whole season. But everyone's agreed that November is clearly too late, and the usual advice about late September or early October is probably still valid during COVID-19 as well. Even though this was an older individual, nevertheless, young people still die of the flu as well. I want everybody to take appropriate precautions. Anybody aged 6 months and up, unless you've got a medical reason not to, you should get the flu shot. It's available pretty much everywhere. Almost anybody can get it, and the vast majority of people do very well. I think people are beginning to understand what they need to do to keep transmission down. Plus, there's a recognition with the current tier system. If folks want stuff to open up earlier and get back to as much of as normal as we can do during this particular pandemic, we're going to need to make some progress on those numbers, and I think people have really risen to the occasion. It doesn't take a whole lot to make sure that you have your facial covering on when you're out. It doesn't take a whole lot to realize you got to maintain that 6 feet, and then just to make sure that you're not going to large gatherings, even if people are there that you know, and even if they appear healthy. I think people are realizing that even though the vast majority of people with COVID-19 will recover, it still is a dangerous infection in certain people, and it is clearly much more dangerous than even the flu. I think that if we do the right thing and we keep maintaining those precautions, which I think have gotten us this far, we'll continue to keep our hospitalizations low, we'll continue to keep our community spread low, and then maybe we can help to progress through this framework and get things back to as much normal as we can under the circumstances. I certainly am concerned that people may get the wrong idea. The virus is still around. We've got plenty of circulating virus about. That was the case in May, and we saw what happened in late June and July. So yes, I am concerned about that, but I think that also people do have a memory about what happened before, that we'll be able to put those plans into place to help that to prevent again. We are watching carefully. We certainly know that the state is, and if people do the right thing and our businesses and residents and government all come together for those precautions and preventive measures we know that actually can do the job, we may be able to get through this and get more of our businesses open and people back to work. I know that we're all very concerned that a vaccine come out as soon as is practicable. And I've said on many occasions that this isn't over until we actually do have a vaccine. On the other hand, the phase 3 trial where we sit down with a large number of people who've received a vaccine candidate and see if it actually protects them, that's important information. We've gone through the phase 1, the phase 2 portions of it. We presume that the vaccines have gotten to the point where they're safe, at least in the vast majority of people. And we now need to find out whether they can actually do the job. Because a vaccine that may appear not to have many side effects and people seem to get it and looks like it is well tolerated them, if it turns out the vaccine actually doesn't protect them, then we can end up in a worse situation we did in the first place when people falsely believe that they're protected and spread occurs anyway. So even though I know that there is a lot of interest in this, I know people want to move really fast. I certainly would like to see a vaccine as soon as is reasonable. But I also want to make sure that we have the studies in place to know the vaccine actually does the job we think it will. And then also to make sure that people understand the benefits of the vaccine to them as well. And that's going to be a much harder sell to do if it comes down the pike too quickly. We don't even know what vaccine will eventually come out of these studies as the one that we're going to use. It could be several of them. And people's reactions, people's perception of any individual vaccine can be very different from another. That number may change in a heartbeat. And 60% of the American population is surprisingly not a great deal when you actually need to prevent transmission in some populations. If some areas don't get it to the extent that other ones do, then those populations could be at risk even if the vaccine turns out to be good. So we really do need to learn from those previous situations. In 2009, when we had H1N1, that vaccine came down the pipe pretty quickly too, but that was kind of an exception to the rule because we already know how to make flu vaccines, and H1N1 was just another kind of flu. In fact, what people may not realize is that every year's flu shot these days now contains an H1N1 strain, mostly because of 2009, and we want to make sure that transmission is reduced. We've learned a lot of lessons with vaccines. I think we can make a good product. We just have to make sure we do the work to make sure that it is safe and effective. I think what could have made the outcome different is if we'd had a good example to look to as far as what we need to do individually. Because certainly our businesses, they have standards they need to reach, our hospitals, our medical care facilities. But ultimately, one of the biggest things that contributed particularly to the surge that we had in July is also individual behavior. And making sure that we had good modeling where everybody from the top down took it seriously and demonstrated this is a problem that we need to solve. We need to get this fixed not only for our individual health, but also for the health of our economy, for the health of our businesses, our schools, our workplaces, for the continuity of government, for all those things that a pandemic can affect. What we really need to make sure is that we have good modeling from the top down to say, you know what, as an individual, you have the ability to prevent spread in your own neighborhood. You shouldn't be wearing a mask just to fill a square. You should be doing it because you're committed to reducing the transmission of COVID-19 to your loved ones, to your neighbors, and to your community as well. And I think that if we had had that early on and was able to enunciate that from the federal level on the way down to the states and locally and everywhere that we could actually reinforce that message, I think we could have seen things really make some changes. The good news is people are starting to realize that now. It's unfortunate we had to get as long to this point as we did, but I think that people are starting to get the message, and I think that if we can get that through to all sectors that are trying to deal with the coronavirus pandemic, we'll be able to hold on until we can get that vaccine in place and finally break the transmission once and for all.